Welcome to SS2 Christian Religious Studies. This lesson explores the relationship between Christianity and politics in Nigeria, the biblical teaching on Christians' relationship to the state, the history of church-state relations in Nigeria, and the ethical responsibilities of Christian citizens. The New Testament provides several key texts on the Christian's relationship to political authority. Romans 13 verses 1-7, the most systematic New Testament treatment, let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted. Give to everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. This passage, written by Paul during the reign of the Roman Emperor Nero, advocates general submission to state authority. However, it is important to note the context. Paul is not teaching unconditional obedience to tyrants. He specifies that rulers should be servants of God for good, verse 4. When rulers become agents of evil, the calculus changes. Acts 5 verse 29, the apostles before the Sanhedrin, we must obey God rather than human beings. This establishes that God's law takes precedence over human law when they conflict. Revelation 13, a very different picture. Here the Roman state is portrayed as a beast demanding worship, an image of tyrannical power that must be resisted by the people of God. This shows that the New Testament itself holds a nuanced view of political authority, generally to be respected but not when it demands what belongs only to God. The Old Testament prophets modeled a different kind of political engagement, speaking truth to power. Nathan the prophet confronted King David over his adultery and murder, 2 Samuel 12 verses 1-14, with the famous words, "You are the man," demonstrating that no one, not even the king, is above God's moral law. Elijah confronted King Ahab over his seizure of Naboth's vineyard, 1 Kings 21, an act of royal theft that violated the property rights and dignity of an ordinary man. Amos, Micah, Isaiah, and Jeremiah all spoke directly and specifically against the rulers of their day, condemning exploitation of the poor, corruption of the courts, and the abuse of power. Jesus himself confronted Herod Antipas. When told that Herod wanted to kill him, Jesus called Herod a fox, Luke 13 verse 32, a term of contempt for a shrewd but dishonest ruler. Jesus also overturned the tables of the money changers in the temple, Mark 11 verses 15-18, challenging the religious commercial establishment of his day. The prophetic tradition establishes that silence in the face of injustice is not an option for God's people. Nigerian Christian leaders have sometimes modeled this prophetic role, speaking against military dictatorship, corruption, and election rigging. The relationship between Christianity and Nigerian politics has been complex throughout Nigeria's history. Colonial era, Christian missions and British colonial administration were deeply entangled. Missionaries provided education and healthcare, and many early Nigerian nationalists were products of mission schools. However, churches also sometimes legitimized colonial power. Post-independence Nigeria, the early Nigerian leaders, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Obafemi Awolowo, Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, represented different religious traditions. The January 1966 coup and the Civil War, 1967-1970, had religious and ethnic dimensions that continue to shape Nigerian politics. Military era, 1966-1999. Some church leaders provided prophetic resistance to military dictatorship. Catholic bishops, in particular, were willing to criticize military governments. Fourth Republic, 1999. Present Christianity has become deeply enmeshed in Nigerian party politics. Presidents Obasanjo, Jonathan, and Buhari all used religious identity in political campaigns. The presidency as Christian-Muslim balancing act, Christian president, Muslim vice president or vice versa, reflects Nigeria's religious arithmetic. Problems: the politicization of religion, churches endorsing politicians who have not demonstrated Christian values, particularly integrity and anti-corruption, the prosperity gospel creating expectations of divine endorsement of wealthy and powerful political patrons, some church leaders exchanging prophetic voice for political access and patronage. Biblical teaching creates clear civic responsibilities for Nigerian Christians. Voting, the exercise of the franchise, is a civic duty. The failure of many Nigerians, including Christians, to register and vote in elections is a failure of civic responsibility. Romans 13 and 1 Peter 2 verses 13 to 17 both emphasize the Christian obligation to participate in the civic life of their society. Refusing to vote or paying bribes to acquire or sell votes corrupts the democratic process. Anti-corruption, the biblical prohibition on dishonesty, bribery, and theft applies directly to political corruption. Proverbs 11 verse 1, God detests dishonest scales. Proverbs 29 verse 4, by justice a king gives a country stability, but those who are greedy for bribes stay down. Nigerians who participate in or tolerate corruption, including Christians who pay or receive bribes, are violating clear biblical teaching. Accountability, Christians in public office are accountable to God for how they use power. Romans 13 verse 4, rulers are God's servants for good. Prayerful support, 1 Timothy 2 verses 1 to 2, urge that petitions, prayers, intercession and thanksgiving be made for all people, for kings and all those in authority, that we may live peaceful and quiet lives in all godliness and holiness. Prophetic witness, the church has a responsibility to speak truth to power on issues of justice, corruption, and the protection of the vulnerable. Today we covered that the Bible holds a nuanced view of political authority. Romans 13 calls for general submission to governing authorities as God's servants for good. Acts 5 verse 29 affirms obeying God over human law when they conflict. Revelation 13 portrays tyrannical power as something to be resisted. The prophetic tradition, Nathan, Elijah, Amos, Jesus, models speaking truth to power. In Nigerian history, the church has sometimes modeled prophetic resistance against military dictatorship and sometimes been complicit with power, prosperity gospel, political patronage. Christian civic responsibilities include voting, anti-corruption witness, accountability of Christians in power, prayerful intercession, and prophetic witness. For your essay, using Romans 13 verses 1 to 7 and Acts 5 verse 29, explain the biblical basis for both civic obedience and civic disobedience, and apply this to the responsibility of Nigerian Christians in the face of corrupt governance.